Week 1 of the Mother Lode League was up and down. Only 2 of the 5 teams getting a Week 1 victory. I'm Levi Flores. He's Jeremy Hurtado. Welcome to Striking Gold. Well, Week 1, let's start at Amador Forest Hill. It wasn't necessarily what we expected, but Amador did get a victory. I mean, one of the only 2 teams that actually got a win this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Amador, we didn't really know what to expect. Hadn't played varsity football in a little bit. They came out, and on the first possession, Forest Hill came out, scored, and I thought, uh-oh, this could be troublesome for Amador. But then Amador came back and said, okay, no problem. Came back, answered with 40 straight points, having a 40-7 lead at one point in the third quarter, led by a strong ground game. They also run that pistol spread type look, threw the ball a couple times for some scores. So they looked pretty good against Forest Hill. Now, will that translate later on the week? We'll see. They have a tough matchup this week coming up against a team that hasn't played yet. So we'll see how things play out for Amador. But great Week 1 win, or Week 0 win, if however you want to look at it. Got to beat the teams that are on the schedule, and they did that in the opening game.
And this was Amador's first game since September 2nd, 2022. The surprise scoring was just something unbelievable that nobody can really expect. You see teams take a lull, take a break, and then when they come back, you expect them to do well, but not as well as 40 points. That was pretty surprising. This is also their first win since April 9th, 2021. So even before that, during the COVID season, and that was against Argonaut for a 42-0 win.
Yeah, and then putting 46 points on the board. I think 46-26 final score. Hey, like I said, hats off to Amador. Way to get back on the winning track. Now let's see if they can take that on the road next week, or this week rather, to Rio Vista.
And let's look back at our predictions from the first episode of Striking Gold. You said 22-16 would be the final score in favor of Amador. I said 21-14. So we both we're going to do a tracking system here where we both get a point for guessing the correct team, and then you were just a tad bit closer because they scored so many points. So you're going to go up 2-1 just on that first matchup. But then when we go down the street a little ways, Argonaut versus Douglas. This was another one that neither of us expected and kind of hurt the power rankings, if I were to say so.
Yeah, absolutely. Argonaut came out, and there's no real other way to say it. They kind of struggled on offense. Had less than 100 yards of offense in the whole game. Committed 4 turnovers. I mean, no matter who you play, that's going to hurt you, especially in your first game back with a new coach. And then Douglas had 4 rushing touchdowns by Connor Jackson. He had a huge evening for Douglas. So, I mean, that's one of those things that Argonaut, hopefully they can just say, hey, game 1, flush it, let's get back to business. And again, 40-0 loss to Arhug versus Douglas. Hey, Argonaut, we'll just flush that and then get ready for next week. That's how I would look at it if I was a coach. Hey, sometimes you just don't have it that day for whatever reason, and Union Mine comes into town now, and then we'll see how that plays out.
And last year, Douglas Argonaut played in Week 1 of the season. Douglas took a 20-0 win, so you'd expect a little bit more from Argonaut coming into the season as they knew what the team was going to do, but that wasn't the case here. Also, along with that, had 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and an interception. So those are a few things that you can look at and say, hey, they probably wouldn't have scored as much. It probably would have been close to that 20-ish mark again if you didn't give up those turnovers. With that, the predictions once more. We both said Argonaut, so nobody's getting points in that realm. You said 21-17, I said 21-14. So I was 3 points closer to it. I'm not sure if you want to give a point for that.
No, let's just go if we get the team right. So
okay, so team right. No points awarded on that one. 40-0 ended up being the final score there in Argonaut. But then Calaveras versus Stone Ridge, one of the closer matchups that nobody really expected here. And I have to say, during the Somerville game last week and during the Striking Gold episode, I talked so much about the Stone Ridge Christian offense and how they just did the smash mouth football. They would get all 11 guys right on the line, condense, hand the ball off, and push forward. But then we got the word on the way home from the game that they changed their offense, got a new offensive coordinator, and now they're doing a spread offense, which is the complete opposite. And it just confused everyone because they ran that offense better than anyone has ever seen. But now they're going back to the spread, still getting victories. Yeah,
they came out spread option and really jumped on Calaveras early. Had 22-0 lead here at halftime. And things just kind of didn't look good for Calaveras. Actually, I think it was right before halftime. It was 22-0. Regardless, Calaveras turned the ball over again. That's kind of one of those things we're going to talk about. They had 5 turnovers in the game.
Yes.
2 of them in the red zone. So, that's going to make it tough to win any game. Also, Stone Ridge scored twice on 4th and goal. So, that kind of chance to get off the field didn't get it done by the Calaveras defense. Ultimately, those 2 scores end up being a 2-score game, 28-13. Now, on the positive side, Caden Spur had a good game, 18 carries, 81 yards, as well as Tyler Brim. He had 11 carries for 38 yards, 2 touchdowns, leading the way for the Reds. So Redhawks, yes. New names, but still, Calaveras, I don't even know if we thought it was going to be that close, honestly. So it's kind of a positive for that as far as that goes. Had a chance to be in the game against a very good Stone Ridge Christian team, so that could be positive to build off of if you're Calaveras.
And it was another one of these Mother Lode League teams that struggled in the turnovers. You mentioned it, but 3 of them were fumbles, 2 of them were interceptions. But they also went 4 of 10 on third down conversions, which you can take either way. It's kind of the middle ground of that. Despite the loss, you look at some of the statistics. And now you look at total yards. SRC, 257 total yards to Calaveras' 225. Right. Very close in that realm, just couldn't find the end zone. Passing yards, SRC had 24 more than Calaveras, and rushing yards fairly even, only being 8 yards separation, which is also very good. So Calaveras has a lot behind them going into it against that Stone Ridge Christian team. When we look at who we thought was going to win, we both thought Stone Ridge Christian was going to come out on top, in which they did. You guessed 35-14, I guessed 42-14, and although we were correct on the Calaveras side, 28 is what Stone Ridge ended up putting up, so you get 2 more points for that, and I will get 1. Now to Sonora Oakdale, one of the biggest rivalries in high school sports in the Central Valley. It was another close one, but this time down in the corral.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was a game that we kind of had some people texting us some scores, and we kind of got information about, and as we were doing the Somerville game, so it was good to have those people at the game and giving us that information. Oakdale came out on top 27-20. Sonora had a chance in the last drive to kind of try and make something happen. Unfortunately, didn't convert it. But I think that's a pretty good showing for Sonora. It's one of those things where Sonora's not beat Oakdale in a while. Okay, and Oakdale has a new coach, so we kind of threw that out last week. But overall, when you look at it, I feel positives for Sonora, even though, you don't want to lose your rivalry ever. But I think that's going to set them up for another run here at the Mother Lode League.
And I think Oakdale having a new coach actually puts them in somewhat of a better position still winning that game. I'm not sure exactly how that will play out for them through the rest of the season, but that new coach, they don't have that rivalry as much deep down in their hearts. So I think that, if it was a few games into the season, they may have had another touchdown within that, but that wasn't the case here. Looking at it, it was a tight game, very back and forth all the way through. Oakdale put up 291 total yards, Sonora 257, but one thing that we do really need to look at is the pass game, 107 total passing yards.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been kind of the way that Sonora's kind of been going the last couple of years. Yes, everybody's like, oh, they run that triple option, they run the ball, which they do. Don't get me wrong, that's what they want to do. But they've kind of been more opening up the offense, so to say. Last year, they did a lot of passing out of the offense, a lot of it off of play action, which you expect off a good run team. But they weren't afraid to throw like a slant or even the verts, simple patterns that are easy as reads for the quarterback to throw. One look, boom, there it is. Make that play, or we do something else with it. So they've done a good job of kind of almost tweaking the offense, but with staying true to who they are.
Sonora had 3 turnovers in the game, 2 fumbles, 1 interception, but they also caused 1 fumble and 1 interception on the back end. So it really came down to that 1 turnover, and I think you mentioned that in episode 1. Along with that, 4 of 8 on third down conversions, 50%, not too bad. And Sonora, it's just a start.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I think this is a positive for them. I think they can build on it. They have a very tough opponent coming into the Dunleavy Field this Friday night versus Ripon. But, we'll get into that in a little bit. But, still, Sonora, I think there's positives there to take away, even though they fall to their rival Oakdale.
So Oakdale won 27-20. You had a final score of 35-28, and I went 24-17. So I'll be getting 2 points for that. You won. And this next game we were both at. You can go back, watch it anytime on NorCal Sports TV. But it's Somerville at Gustine, which this one was probably the most likely candidate for we know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, Gustine comes in. They have a new offense. They went to that triple option tight look that they ran all night. They had a quarterback that was their leader last year, 800 plus total yards. And then we didn't really know anything else about them. And they had an offensive lineman that they really liked. Other than that, there wasn't a lot that we knew about them. As positive as their coach was in the interviews and stuff, you never really know as a coach what you have until you see a game. On the positive side for Gustine, they turned the ball over twice in a row, led to 2 scores for Somerville, and that kind of put them behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and that kind of made everything kind of lean Somerville's way. Now, that being said, Somerville flat out came out and had a track meet, okay? Yeah. If you line all the players up from Gustine and Somerville and you had them race, pretty sure it'd been Somerville 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, 8, who knows? Yep. I don't know if anybody on Gustine could have kept up with some of those guys from Somerville. And in the end, when you get those guys in space, that causes problems for a defense. And as we've seen in the game, I mean, you had touchdown from speed left, speed right. I mean, it was just Hike had 2, Cash had 2. So it was just a track meet, so to speak, down in Gustine.
And there was a few players that we didn't expect to see get a handle on the ball too, but they ended up getting a few carries. Somerville ended up having 7 ball carriers and 4 targeted receivers, which is a lot more than a lot of teams can handle, but 11 of them are the option as of now. And there was a few on the roster that we saw were sure we're going to get a carry, but never touched the ball once. So there's still even more options for Somerville to go there. But then their defense has a new party in which Nevis had 17 tackles in that game, which was kind of overlooked at the time. We didn't really get a look at that, but 17 tackles he led by over triple anyone else. Bryce Rathmill caused a sack fumble, and Arian Schnabel, who played both sides of the ball. Yeah,
and you talked about it, the leader there, Nevis rather, he was kind of quiet. It wasn't like we felt like we were saying his name a lot. I mean, he made tackles, and it's hard to kind of see sometimes in that scrum of who makes a tackle until they go back and watch the film. But I remember we said his name 3 or 4 times. He had a good game. I didn't think that he had like a 17 tackle game, but then I saw the stats. I'm like, okay, awesome. So that's something to look for this week against Dos Palos, because Dos Palos is going to bring a whole different type of offense and a whole different set of problems for the defense from Somerville. So they're going to need all those guys on defense to come up and kind of change the way they thought of things this week as they oppose Dos Palos next week, or this Friday night.
And one more thing about Somerville is the sophomore kicker, Bryson Benitez, hadn't kicked a football his entire life until 3 weeks before game number 1. Went 5 for 5 on extra point attempts. There was a few fumbled snaps and things like that just didn't allow him to get the ball up in the air, but they went for 2 on those attempts. But here, 5 for 5 as a sophomore kicker, and had just touched the football for the first time to his cleats.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he came out, and you can kind of tell he was a little nervous in some of the pregame warm-up stuff they did, but I mean, 5 for 5, solid. Like you said, they missed 2 extra points. Not his fault. Never got a chance to kick them. So far, he's perfect. I mean, that's the way it is, So, great job by the sophomore. He gets to make his home debut Friday night against Dos Palos, so that'll be exciting for him. So, I mean, again, Somerville came out and did what they had to do against Gustine. Did they give up a little points at the end that they maybe shouldn't have on the Yes, but that's what week 0 or 1 is for. Hey, you won the game. You move on. You build for next week.
Looking back at our predictions too, 35-14 is what you had, and I went 42-14, which is very close to the score that ended up being last year. Final score is 41-18, so I get 2 more points, you get 1, which ties our predictive ratings at 6-6.
There you go, perfect.
At the end of the week. But before we move on to what's going to happen for week 2, we want to thank Sonora Conference Center, our sponsor for this video of Striking Gold. 4 unique rooms in downtown Sonora. Go to sonoraconferencecenter.com to learn more information and to rent it out. And please do so. So Coming up, Amador at Rio Vista.
Yeah, Amador 1-0 at Rio Vista, 0-0. So Rio Vista last year was 6-5 last year, lost in Ripon Christian in the playoffs. And the crazy part about them is they had a young team. They had only 2 seniors last year on that team. So they got 26 guys on the roster, loads of talent come back, and they kind of learn to win games together as a young team. That's going to be a tough game, I think, for Amador.
Yeah, and when we look at what Max Preps gives between these two teams, Rio Vista gives a 30-point advantage in the section rankings. But what we saw from Amador, they don't really have rankings to go off of for the last 2 years. So that's going to give another thing towards Amador, and I think it could be fairly even.
No, absolutely. And Amador's got some speed at running back. They got some guys that run the ball pretty well last week. So we'll see how things play out against Rio Vista. Rio Vista probably going to be a little bigger than Forest Hill up front. So that should cause some problems for Amador. But Amador's offense and defensive lines look pretty good size on film. And I like I said, Rio Vista in the past, I'm not sure if they're still running it, but they've ran that triple option look that Amador or Argonaut has traditionally ran in some other teams. So that could be an advantage to Amador too, because they've seen it a lot. Amador runs the spread, so the Rio Vista sees the spread a lot in their league, so I don't think that's a huge advantage. So who knows? Like I said, I think it's going to be a tough game. I think that Amador ultimately prevails. I say 35-26.
Okay, I actually have 35-21, and I pre-wrote them down just so that I'm not cheating.
I printed mine out too, so that way we had it, so that we don't have to worry about that.
35-21 is what I have, 35-26 for you. And when we look at the last 2 meetings between the two teams since 2005, and 2015 was the start of the 2-year guarantee for them. 46-12 is Amador victory in the first round. Second round, Amador wins again, this time 59-6. So Amador, they've got to see a few looks in somewhat recent years. Like 8 years is a lot of time, but they have played them since the Motherlode League has had this surrounding. On top of that, first away game for Amador.
Actually, they played at Forest Hill last week.
Second away game for Amador.
Like I said, I think Amador is going to struggle. I think Rio Vista is going to cause some issues, but I think ultimately Amador has enough depth to get through this week and move on to next week 2-0.
And now going up to Argonaut versus Union Mine, future league opponents. Next year is when they will start that. But this one is looking a little different. Union Mine, they have some very good sports. When we look at basketball, Union Mine's always at the top of the list for their division. But when it comes to football, you get different scenarios. Yeah,
and this is going to be one of those situations where Union Mine beat Argonaut last year, 20-0 on the varsity level over there at Union Mine. This time it's at Argonaut. Argonaut, like I said, struggled last week, and Union Mine got the W. They beat Bella Vista out of the Sacramento area 23-15. So there's not a lot of information to go off of, but I'm going to let you pick this one first.
For this one, I have Union Mine winning 35-10. I think that's fair for both sides. Union Mine getting that victory, Argonaut losing, and it's how do they respond to the shutout? Because nobody wants to get shut out. All those players are angry. They're going to show up, but how long is it going to last? Because when a team is better than you, there's just not much that you can do at that point. So 35-10, Union Mine.
Absolutely, and I got Union Mine 30-6. I think Union Mine has a little bit too much speed, too much athleticism for Argonaut at this point in time. Now, Argonaut, don't get distracted or disturbed or whatever. Last year you started 0-2 as well, ended up finishing third place, went to the playoffs. So there's nothing to worry about if you're Argonaut, I don't think. I just feel that Union Mine is in a good matchup this week against you.
And it may help during league play as well. You play the tougher teams so that when you get into league, it's a little bit easier for you. But Union Mine, I think, does have a step ahead.
Absolutely.
Now, Calaveras going into a different state, the Silver State of Nevada, going over to play Carson.
Yeah, and this is a return. Last year, Carson came to Calaveras and played. This year, Calaveras goes up there. Again, there's not a lot of information about Carson out there right now that we've seen. I do know they lost to Sutter last week, 54-7. Now, Sutter, a new school in the Sac Joaquin section. I'll tell you, they're loaded usually, so that doesn't shock me any that Carson fell to them. And I really think it's going to be kind of a back-and-forth game. I think both teams are going to find some offense. And in the end, I just think Carson has a little more than Calaveras right now. I got 28-20 Carson.
And I have 27-21 Carson winning this, and I even wrote down overtime just in case you want to check. But I really do think it could be 21-21 going into an extra inning or an extra quarter there. Calaveras, tough loss to SRC. We talked about that. They have a long bus ride over the pass into Nevada. They had 5 turnovers last week, so they have to avoid that. And looking at what Douglas did to Argonaut in similar capacity over on that side. So I think that Calaveras has some issues ahead of them. But yeah, and then that loss to Sutter from Carson. Sutter had been always at number 1 through the rankings last year. No matter what any other team did, Sutter was always number 1. So losing 54-7 is no issue. You just have to look past it and go on to the next game.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I think Carson, seeing Calaveras last year, yes, it's a new offense, new team, but they kind of seeing the players, they know who's there. I think that's going to ultimately get them an extra little advantage at home. And Carson, like you said, longer trip. So unfortunately, Calaveras, I feel 0-2 after this week. And again, 0-2 isn't a death sentence, so we don't have to worry about that. I think that they're going to be just fine. But that's just how it is this week.
Going now to Tuolumne County, Sonora versus Ripon, a battle that's been going on for a few years. Sonora, they took the loss to Oakdale, but it was in similar means to how they lost last year as well. This is another Future League opponent rivalry in which Ripon last week 1-0 in a high-scoring game against Linden, 49-42.
Yeah, absolutely. And last week it was just X marks the spot. I got Xavier Clark, 155 yards and a touchdown, and then Xander Reyes, 73 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, all of that on the ground, so it's clear that Ripon is, hey, we're going to run the football right at you, and if you can stop us, so be it. Linden wasn't able to do it last week, and I don't know if Sonora can do it this week. I think this could be a shootout. I have it as a high-scoring game.
And looking back at Xavier Clark for Ripon, his 155 rushing yards only came on 8 carries.
Yeah, absolutely. So that means he's got big play potential anytime he touches the ball. This is going to be one of those games that if you're not at, hey, you can check it out on NorCal Sports TV. We'll be there broadcasting it. It's going to be, I think, a game definitely worth checking into. If you're not watching it live, you can go back and watch it on demand anytime you want. But I think it's going to be one of those games you're going to want to check out.
And you might have to switch back and forth between Sonora and Somerville because Dos Palos is going to give Somerville a run for their money, just like they did last year, too. Ripon, 342 rushing yards, averaging 9.8 yards per carry. That's another big one. Xavier Clark did more than that, but the average, 9.8. I mean, that's just another element that you have to look at. And Linden, they may be lower than Sonora, but they're still a football team, and they allowed that to happen.
Yeah, and another thing, I mean, a lot of teams come to Sonora and they kind of get an ooh and ah and everything that happens. Well, Ripon's been here before. So they're not going to get that, oh my goodness, look at that, it's pretty, it's this and that. Yeah, they know they're coming to play a football game, and they've been here before, they've done that. So that's one of those things where future TVL teams, I really think it's going to be a close game, and I have it 42-38 with Ripon getting the edge.
Ripon?
Yep.
Okay, before I get to what I think is going to happen, Sonora is 6-2 versus Ripon since 2014. They won the last 2 meetings, and their last loss was in 2019 on August 30th, losing 55-14, and then the year before was 34-0, and those were Ripon winning those games. I believe in Sonora. I have a very high score, and it may be laughed at, but I think it's very possible, and I really had to put this out there. 65-28 Sonora.
Okay, wow.
And, Sonora beat Argonaut last year 75-0. I know they have it in them. With the passing abilities that they have shown in week 1 and in the previous seasons, I think it just gives too many options. In Ripon allowing 42 points to Linden, I think Sonora is definitely going to go off for more points, but Ripon's still going to have a decent game on the offense.
All right.
Now looking at Somerville versus Dos Palos, this is going to be a very tough one in which the two teams played for the first time last year. And Dos Palos is one of the biggest CIF schools in history. I didn't know this before, but Dos Palos from 1927 to 2010 had the most CIF league champions, and 47 in those years. And then they also had 18 consecutive league titles, which is the second best in history, following the one and only
De La Salle.
Exactly. So Dos Palos has some big numbers on them. Somerville beat them last year. Nobody really knew the history, but now looking at this, it gets me a little nervous for the Somerville Bears.
Yeah, and I watched a lot of the Dos Palos versus Los Banos game last week on film, and there was times where Dos Palos looked like they could just score whenever they wanted. Then there was times that they kind of got in their own way and struggled. And on the flip side, defensively, it looked like they had a lot of problems defending some of the power runs and speed runs that Los Banos had. Now, we've seen the track meet last week from Somerville. How is that going to translate over to our athletes versus your athletes when Somerville and Dos Palos play up here at Somerville? That's the question. I think this is also a high-scoring game. I think that there's going to be fireworks all over the place. And so I think it's going to be one of the teams, whoever has the ball last might win the game.
And that's what it came down to last year. Somerville just pulled ahead 34-28, and that was at Dos Palos, too, after a long bus ride. Looking at what Dos Palos is bringing to this, 75% run game, 25% pass, and they run 90% of their plays out of the shotgun.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was interesting. Like, you bring that up. I'm glad you did, because I watched the game, and they're in that spread formation, 3 receivers, 3-by-1 look, but they run the ball out of it a lot. And so it's kind of we're going to line up in this 3-by-1 just to spread you out to give us running lanes. Almost an air raid style concept, where we're going to get the guys all spread all over the field, and then we're going to find whatever side we want to go, whatever the numbers feel, we're going to use that as our advantage. So it's going to see, like I said, athlete versus athlete. I am intrigued to see how this matches up.
And last year they had more of a passing game. This year Somerville has pushed it more towards the run side. So that might hurt them a little bit in the end. What it comes down to for me is just Somerville having more people. They proved it in Gustine, and they even had 2 turnovers. Without those turnovers, they would have done better. So here, I think they're going to tighten that up, make sure that they're playing better as a team, and they pull it off 38-28 at Thorstead Field in Tuolumne.
Okay, and I have it Somerville 34, Dos Palos 32.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be a close game. Like I said, it could be a one-possession. I have it a one-possession game, and it could be a late touchdown by Somerville that gets it done. But yeah, 34-20 or 34-32 final score, Somerville over Dos Palos.
And out of all these games, Sonora versus Ripon, Somerville versus Dos Palos, I feel are the 2 biggest games. If you were to watch one of them, where would you be?
Well, I'm going to be in Sonora, so I got to say Sonora. That's the way the boss man makes it. But I was interested to see the Dos Palos game. Honestly, I thought we were like, okay, where are you going to go this week? And I was waiting to hear from him. And then last night he said, hey, you're going over to Sonora. I'm like, okay, no problem. No worries. I think that's going to be a good game too. But I might be checking out the Somerville Dos Palos game on my phone every now and then, saying, okay, what's going on over there? And if not, I'll definitely go home and watch it on demand. So.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about NorCal Sports TV. You can watch them live or on demand, always on YouTube at NorCal Sports TV. Let's look at updated power rankings for the MLL. I'll go first this time. Sonora still remains at the top, even though Somerville had a fantastic run against Gustine. Sonora, despite losing by 7, it's against a higher level team up in a different division. So it goes Sonora, Somerville, and this is where it all gets mixed up. I believe last week I had Calaveras. I bumped up Amador to my number 3 slot just because of that major victory that they had, and then moved down Calaveras, and Argonaut still stays at number 5.
Okay, I can't argue with that. I mean, I kind of thought that's where you were going to go with it. I just made one change. I said, okay, Sonora, obviously number 1. Okay, that's just the way it is. Like you said, they played a team that was a bigger division. They lost, didn't get blown out. It was a close game, leaving them at 1, even though they're 0-1. I flipped Somerville up to number 2 after watching them play against Gustine. I think they just have a track team playing football. Okay? Plain and simple. They have speed everywhere. It's going to be interesting to see how the teams in the Mother League can match up with that. That moved Argonaut down. Now, I know Argonaut didn't score, and it's 1 week. I'm going to say give them a week to see how things work out. New coach, new offense. They're down to number 3. Calaveras stays at 4, and then Amador, yes, I know Amador, you won. And you beat Forest Hill. But let me see you do it a second week, and then maybe we'll move you up a little bit. But for right now, I have them at the number 5 spot.
And I mean, that's totally fair as well. We've only seen 1 week of football. We never really got a chance to deep dive into those Jackson teams either, Argonaut and Amador. So that's completely fair. But I mean, scoring 40 points, Amador, I don't know. I had to do it. I had to push them up.
And I can see that.
It's almost a 3-way tie for me.
Yeah, I think the Argonaut, Calaveras, Amador, they're all kind of in that same range. But for now, I just kind of slid one up, one down, and then said, okay, we're going to leave it there. Now, we get another data point this week to look at, and then I wouldn't be shocked to see things just completely unravel and change next week. Who knows?
That could definitely happen. But Sonora's going to be at home. Somerville's going to be at home. Amador is away. I believe Argonaut is at home. And for Calaveras, they will be away as well. The Mother Lode League has a tough week ahead of them. I think we're going to see better scores than what we saw in week 1. Hopefully, we can get 5 for 5 in the Mother Lode League. That would be pretty cool if we can get an entire week of the league winning. Any last thoughts before we head into Friday night football?
I mean, come out and support your local high school football team, whoever that is. If you live, Sonora, Oakdale, Calaveras, whatever it is, Sonora Catholic. Friday night, nothing better than going out there and seeing a game live. So that's all I can say. Just go out, enjoy yourself, have fun, and can't wait for Friday night.
When we return next week, we'll see who truly struck gold and who looks better at the Mother Lode League. I'm Levi Flores. He's Jeremy Hurtado. Thanks for joining us.